Hi everyone, this is Miss Casey again, and today we're going to be working on our third project for our Creativity and Contest series. Okay, so this project, previously we've worked on how to use our mediums properly. We've also learned about colors and how to use different color schemes to create a feeling or mood in your artwork. And then this week, we are going to be learning about composition. So composition is just the way that you lay out your picture. How do you want it to look? What is your main subject? Where is that going to be placed on your picture? And all of those factors change the way that your picture looks, along with your mediums and colors that you choose. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So let's get started. So here on my table, I have the project that we're going to be working on today, and we're going to come up with two different compositions while also using two different color schemes and any mediums that you want. So as you can see here, I have all the mediums that we've talked about so far on my table, so you can use whatever mediums you feel you would like to use and what you're more comfortable with or what you like most. But our color schemes that we're going to choose, you're going to be choosing two different ones to create a feeling, and you want those feelings to show a difference. You want to be able to see the difference between choosing one color scheme versus the other. Apart from that, for today, what we're focusing on is composition. So in my composition here on my two pictures, they are different. I have used the rule of thirds, which is just when your subject is not directly in the center of your image or your project. And so on this half, I have my subject, my dog, all the way to the left. Okay, it's not directly in the middle. But then on this half, I have my dog, my subject, on the right. So again, it's not directly in the middle. So this is showing you the rule of thirds. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can change up the composition for your artwork in just a moment. All right, everyone, so let's take out our piece of paper. Now, again, we're not going to be working on practice drawings today just because everyone's going to be doing something different. So go ahead and get out your piece of final paper. If you feel like you would like to use watercolors for one of your mediums or your whole picture today, you want to make sure that that paper you choose is thick enough to hold all of that water. So once you have your final paper ready, go ahead and grab your pencil. So you're going to be using a pencil for your drawing today first, but I'm going to be showing you our drawing in Sharpie so you can see my lines much better. Before we get started on our final draw, however, I am going to show you just a couple of ways you can change up your composition in your artwork. So you're not going to draw with me. If you would like to kind of get some practice in, you can, but this is not our practice draw, and you do not have to draw this with me. Okay, so one way that you can change your artwork up is we talked about the rule of thirds. Now, if you've taken some classes with us before, you may have heard this art term before, rule of thirds. And basically what that means is let me break my paper up real quick. If you had, say this was your paper, if you split your paper up into threes, imaginatively, because we don't usually want to draw lines down our paper if we're going to create a whole drawing, but think about your paper in a set of three, splitting it down into three sections. So in the middle, that is usually where we like to place our subjects, directly in the middle to create a very focal point, to create a nice focus for everyone that's seeing our artwork. They know what the main subject is. However, the rule of thirds kind of breaks that rule. Instead of placing your subject or your object in the center, you would place it along the left or the right side of your artwork. Now, usually you want to place it along this left line or this right line. You don't always want to place it all the way to the left or all the way to the right. Depending on how large your paper is, that might end up needing to happen. But if you have a large piece of paper, you kind of want to follow right along these lines. So your subject would be on the left line here or on the right line here, but never in the middle. And that's just with our rule of thirds. Okay, now apart from rule of thirds, there's another way you can change up your composition, and that is by cropping. Now, I feel like most of you may know what cropping is, but just in case you don't, cropping is what happens when an object is so large or the scene that you're drawing is continuing on outside of the frame you're drawing on, so of your paper. That means that the object is going to be cropped, or part of it is going to be coming off of the edges of your paper. Okay, so let me show you what that's going to look like. So say I had a subject here. I'm just going to represent it with a circle. Say I had a subject here. See how I did not draw the whole circle? That's because if my subject was close up in the front, usually that means it is way too close to me. I see so much of it. And if I draw it super low, that means that it's going to be so big, I don't see the rest of it down at the bottom of my paper. So that area would be cropped. Now, another thing that you would do is say you had another object toward the background, maybe it was a tree. We know that trees are really big, and so say this object was a little bit smaller than a tree. Our tree would still be pretty big in the background along our foreground here. And if I were to try to draw the bottom of the right side of the trunk, the right side would be cropped off just a little bit, and then if I were to start drawing the leaves, the right side would be cropped off again. So because that is so big and it's over to the right, it is going to be cropped off. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be because objects are so big. It can also be intentional. So, as part of cropping, let's say that we had a subject right in the middle. Okay, that is our subject there. Now, if we want our subject to look like it's maybe hidden behind some trees or some shrubbery, some bushes, maybe leaves, you can also draw some of those objects nice and big right around the frame, which would also be cropped off of the frame to show that this object is behind something else. Of course, we would erase all of these lines to show that these leaves are overlapping on top of that subject. But that is another way that you could use cropping. Now, as you see, the different ways that you use these compositions are going to change the way that your picture looks. Okay? Now, another way that you can change your composition is by angle. So the angle that you're looking at, or the point of view that you're looking at your object. So say your object was up at the top of your paper. Maybe it's at the top of the ground, or maybe it is in the air, in the sky. Thinking about where the ground is, where the sky is, and where all of the other elements in your background are very important to your composition. So if this was my subject here, do I want it to be flying? If I want it to be in the air, I would draw my ground line nice and low. So it looks like my subject is right above that ground line. If I wanted my subject to look nice and big in my ground, then I would draw my ground line right behind up toward the top of my object. So it looks like it's still on the ground. It is just up toward the top of that ground. Maybe I wanted to draw it somewhere down in the middle where it looks like my object is still on the ground. I would draw it maybe right here along the bottom of my object. But say I wanted it to look like there's still some objects in the background to show perspective and add depth and make my picture or my background look a little bit more interesting. I could add some hills, maybe some clouds, and I can show how far away those are or how close they are by changing the size. And then maybe Since my object is so far back on my ground, that means it's further away. Of course, this circle is nice and big, so that means that that object is still really big since it's a little bit higher and further away. So the object, if I were to add an object down here in the foreground closer to me, that would be much bigger. Maybe it's a person, and maybe it's cropped off. Or maybe you had an object over here, and it's nice and big and cropped off. So that's where you kind of think about where to place different objects in your picture using elements to help you with those. Okay, so that's going to be what we're learning about for composition here. Now, using what we've just learned about using the rule of thirds, using cropping, or changing up the different elements in your picture, next what we're going to do is we're going to get started on our final draw. So you have your paper in front of you. Go ahead and take that back, bring that out. Again, your paper is already in front of you. So what you're going to do next with your pencil, again, make sure you're using your pencil, we're going to split our paper down the middle so we can practice two different compositions to show us how those can change the way our artwork looks. So I'm going to find the middle of my paper, and I'm just going to do the very best I can. If you'd like to use a ruler or a straight edge, you may, but I'm just going to do the best I can to split it down the middle and get a nice even, two different even sections. And once I have those two sections, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw two of the same subjects, one on the left and one on the right. Now, you want to make sure that these are the same subjects, so whatever you draw on the left is going to be the same thing on the right, and you want them to be the same because we want to focus not so much on the subject, but we want to focus on how we create our artwork around it, the composition. Where is our subject located? What is behind the subject? How are the elements around the subject arranged? To maybe make your subject stand out or be a little bit more subtle or fall into the background. So I'm going to be drawing a dog just like I did in my sample here. I'll show you how to draw a dog as I do it again over here, but if you'd like to draw any other subject, you may. You can draw maybe yourself, a friend, a sibling. If you don't want it to be a person, maybe you want to draw a dog, but change it up the way that you want to draw it. Maybe it's a cat, maybe it's a different animal, maybe it's not an animal at all. Maybe it is a large tree, or maybe it's your favorite toy. Okay, this also doesn't have to be an outside scene. Maybe you want it to be inside a room. How would you arrange the elements inside a room? How would you create depth in a room? So have fun, get creative, and as I go along my drawing, I'm going to tell you different things that you may be able to do in your artwork. But first, let's start with our subject. So I'm going to start with my dog, and I'm going to make it on the left side of my picture for our rule of thirds. Now, if you don't want to work on your rule of thirds for this first section, you don't have to. I do recommend doing rule of thirds for at least one of your drawings. So for my rule of thirds dog on the left, I'm going to make my dog on the left side of the paper. And so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle for the head. Once I have that circle for the head, I'm going to go right underneath it and I'm going to draw an oval down along the bottom of the head. Now once I have that oval, I'm going to draw the body. So I'm going to come underneath the oval, and I'm going to draw a curved line out, and then bring it back down. And do the same thing on the right. Curved line out, and bring it back down. We don't want them to meet in the middle. This is going to be for the front legs, the front of the body. Now once I have that, I'm going to draw two nice ovals at the bottom for the legs. Then I'm going to draw 2 curved lines for the inside of the legs. I don't want to go all the way up just yet. Next, I'm going to draw the back legs. So for the back legs, I'm going to start on the left side, right underneath that big curve of my front leg. And I'm going to draw another big curved line that comes up and over to my front foot. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, up and over to my front foot. And now I'm going to draw my back feet, and I'm just going to draw 2 curved lines like a letter C for the feet. Now right in between my front feet here, I'm going to draw a curved line like a letter U for the bottom of the body. And now that we have the body and the head, next we're going to add our details. So first, what I recommend is, since you're using a pencil, go ahead and erase this line inside of the bottom oval of the head. You're also going to erase the top of the oval for the bottom of the head. We only want to keep the sides and the bottom, side, and top of the head. So your dog's head should look like this. The circle for the top and the oval for the bottom, but nothing inside. Alright, once you have erased those lines, next we're going to draw the ears on the side of the head. Now, if you're drawing a dog like me, you can draw any kind of ears that you'd like. I'm going to draw some long triangle ears. So I'm going to draw a curved line on the left and a curved line on the right. Then I'm going to bring that down and keep it pointed at the bottom, but a little bit rounded as well, and bring it up to the side of the head. So now I have my pointed, my triangle ears. And now you can go ahead and add the details inside of your dog's body, however you'd like, whatever kind of dog you'd like to draw. I'm going to start with the nose. So right in the middle of the head, I'm going to draw a nice big oval for the nose. So I know there's a lot of lines here. So if I were doing it here, I would go right in the middle and draw a nice big nose. Once I have the nose, I'm going to draw a line that comes down for the mouth. Then I'm going to draw 2 curved lines to finish up the mouth. Once I have that, then I'm going to draw the eyes. And you can draw the eyes however you'd like. I'm just going to draw 2 circles and then 2 smaller circles inside. And you can make these 2 smaller circles wherever you'd like. If you want your dog to look to the left, to look to the right, to look down, you can make those smaller circles wherever. And then if you'd like to add a little pattern, maybe you want to add a spot around the eye or a patch of spots anywhere else on the body, that's up to you. I'm going to draw this pattern that comes down the middle of the face and brings around the snout. Down the middle and around the snout. Okay, so I'm going to do that again here. Just so you can see the full effect, I'm going to draw my dog's ears here. Now also in your dog's nose, if you'd like, you can also add some little nostrils. And if you'd like, you can add eyebrows or whiskers. That's up to you. Now also what I'm going to be doing to my dog is right underneath the head in the front of the body, I'm going to add a little patch of fur. So I'm going to come from the bottom of the head and draw some squiggly lines that come down and then come into the middle. It's a little patch of fur that I have. And again, you can add a pattern to anywhere else on your dog's body. You can make it as furry as you want, as smooth as you want. But lastly, we're going to add the tail. And you can make the tail on the right or the left, wherever you have room. But I'm going to go ahead and add it to the right. Now I'm going to make it nice and fluffy, just like the little patch of fur on the body. And once you have all of those details for your dog, then that's all you need to add. Okay. So now that we've drawn our subject, again, if you didn't draw a dog, go ahead and keep working on the subject that you are drawing. If you are ready, you can go ahead and move on with us and add that subject again on the right side of your picture. If you are not done with your drawing, you can go ahead and pause where you're at, continue working, and then you can play when you are ready. But all we're doing next is drawing this subject again on the right side of our picture. And again, you want the same subject, but you want to change up the composition. So we have our dog on the left using rule of thirds. For this right side, if you would like to use a different type of composition, you may. You want to keep the same subject, but you can use rule of thirds and change your dog to the right. Maybe you want to use cropping, and so you want to have your dog nice and big, really, really low toward the bottom of your picture. If you didn't do a dog, whatever subject you have, but you want to change up the composition. I'm going to be using rule of thirds again, but instead of going to the left, I'm going to go on the right side of the picture. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my dog again. And just so I don't get confused with all my lines, I'm going to draw the head as if I drew my basic shapes, but I don't have all of those lines inside. Okay, so everyone, you are going and finishing up your subject on the right. If you're doing the same thing as me, just follow the steps that we used on our first dog to draw the dog on the right. Now you want these to look as close alike as possible, but sometimes it is hard to make your dog look exactly the same. So if it doesn't, that's okay. All right, now once you have your subject drawn again in the second picture, wherever you decided to do that, whether it was cropped to the right, centered, wherever you decided to make your subject, go ahead and finish that up. If you need more time, you may pause the video and play when you are ready. But now that we have our subjects on our paper and we've laid those out, next we're going to think about the other elements in our artwork, our background. How are we going to create depth? How are we going to finish up our composition? So first, I'm going to come back to the left dog here. And for the left dog, I think I'm going to make my ground line low and close to the bottom of the body on my dog. So now that I have that, it's going to look like my dog is a really big dog, and it is closer to the ground. So that means that I am really close to the dog and the objects in the foreground. Now that I have my ground line over here, I'm going to hop over to my right side. So for my right side, I want this to look completely different than the left side. So now that I place my ground line towards the bottom, I'm going to go and place my ground line at the top behind my dog. You can place it above your dog as well, and that's going to make it look like the background is even further. If you place the ground line directly if you place your ground line at the top but behind your dog, it's going to make it look like your background is still far away, but your dog is still a little bit closer to it. So however higher your ground line is, that's going to make it look like that background is much, much further away. However lower your ground line is, that's going to make it look like the ground and your subject, if it's sitting on the ground, is much closer to you. Okay? So now that we have our ground line, next we're going to place some other elements in our picture. So where is your subject? Is it inside? Is it outside? Is it playing in the park? Is it playing in the grass? Where is your subject? So since I have a dog, I'm going to make it look like it's outside. So for this side here, I'm going to draw some hills. And since I'm pretty close up, I'm going to make my hills nice and big in the background. Now that I have that, I'm going to also add something in the foreground. And again, I'm really close to my dog and my foreground, so I'm going to draw my object here in the foreground nice and big. So whatever you draw in the foreground, make sure it's big. You can crop it off if you need to, but whatever is in the foreground, you want to make sure it's really big. So for the foreground here, I'm going to draw a dog bowl. Now dog bowls are usually not much bigger than the dog because they have to eat out of it. You don't want them to swim in their dog bowls. But when I draw my dog bowl today, I'm going to make it look almost as big as my dog because it is much closer to me than my dog is. So I'm going to draw first the opening of my dog bowl. Then I'm going to draw the bottom of my dog bowl. And the bottom is going to be cropped off just a little bit. But my dog bowl is really big. It's almost the same size as my dog. Now I can also add maybe some dog food inside. And there's my dog bowl. Now I don't want to add too much to my picture. We're just focusing on practicing how to make a composition, change up our composition, and arrange our elements, our objects and subjects in our picture. So now that I have my left side, I'm going to work on the right side. Now, my background is much further away than this background here, so I'm going to make it look like I have trees in the background, and they're going to be much smaller. We know that trees are much bigger than dogs, but since my trees are further away, they're going to look smaller compared to my dog. Okay, so I'm going to draw my tree here. I'm going to draw 2 curved lines for the trunk. I'm going to draw like a letter V, and then another letter V. And then I'm going to draw letter U's on top of all of those branches. Then I'm going to draw my leaves here. Okay, so I have one tree, and if I were to compare the size of that tree to the size of my dog, again, it's much smaller, and that's what we want because we want it to look further away. But trees, we know, are a lot bigger than dogs, and that's okay. Now I'm going to draw another tree behind our dog here. I'm going to draw a little shaggy tree, pine tree, and my trunk. Okay, and again, that tree is much smaller than my dog, but it's because it's further away. So now that I have my trees in my background, Next, I'm going to draw some objects in the foreground. What objects are those going to be, and where are they placed? Are they going to be cropped? You do want to make sure that they are large because they are in the front and they are closer to you. So I think I'm going to go with some flowers. So I'm going to draw a nice big center for my flower and nice big petals. And again, it's okay if they crop off a little bit on your paper. And I'm going to draw my stem. Now I'm also going to draw my leaf nice and big here on the edge. Okay, and then I'm also going to draw another flower here, maybe curved a little bit. And again, they should be nice and big because they are closer to us. They should be low and also cropped off a little bit, and that's okay. All right, so we have our dog in the midground, trees in the background, flowers in the foreground. Dog bowl in the foreground, dog in the midground, and then some mountains in the closer to the dog. If you wanted to, maybe you can add some trees to make it look like now those are far away and they're going to be much smaller. Okay, maybe you want to add some clouds and they're going to be pretty small because they are far away. You can also crop off some of your clouds. But have fun, experiment with different compositions. How would you like your picture to look? When you change up those elements, how does it change your picture? They're the same subject, but they look like they're in completely different areas. They look like they're the same size, but they look like they are different sizes because of the elements and the size of those elements around them. So take some time if you're still working on arranging all of those elements in your picture for your composition. Pause the video if needed, but once you are done, we are going to get started on our coloring steps. So for our coloring, you are going to be choosing whatever colors you want to follow a color scheme, just like we learned last class. For our color schemes, just to remind you, I'm going to bring out our color wheel. So our color wheel here, I have red, red, orange, orange, yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, blue, violet, violet, and red, violet. So we have all of our colors, primary, secondary, and tertiary. But what happens when you mix these colors together? What happens when you place these colors next to each other in an artwork? It creates certain color schemes, and those color schemes can change the feeling or mood of your artwork. So we've learned about complementary color schemes. We learned about analogous color schemes, warm and cool colors. We learned about triadic, which is 3 colors equally spaced on the color wheel. We learned about tetradic, which is 4 colors equally spaced on the color wheel. And then we also learned about monochromatic, which is 1 color and using all the different shades of that 1 color. So, thinking about what we learned in our color scheme project, which was where we colored the fish, and we changed up all of the different colors to figure out what colors make a certain mood. Thinking about all of that, go ahead and decide what color scheme you would like for each of your pictures. They should be different from each other. So in my sample for today's project, I made a monochromatic color scheme for the left. Now monochromatic can change the feeling depending on the color that you choose. Blue is a very cool and calming color. It can also make you think of maybe sadness. So using 1 color of blue and doing different shades of those blues can really change up that feeling for that picture. Here in this side, I used complementary colors. So I have blue and orange, and I have green and red. So using those complementary colors, I really make certain objects stand out, and it grabs the attention. So when a certain color is by its complementary color, it really makes that object pop. Okay? So you're going to be deciding on what color schemes you want, and then once you choose your color scheme, you can use any medium you want, and the mediums we learned in our color wheel as well. So maybe you want marker, maybe you want color pencil, and then we learned how to create certain colors with our color pencil and blend those colors together. Maybe you want to use oil pastel, and we learned how to mix those colors to create a new color as well. Maybe you want to do two different mediums and use oil pastel with watercolor. That works perfectly fine. Maybe you want to use chalk pastel, blend some of those colors together, create a gradient. Maybe you want to do an impressionist style and continue using those chalk pastels. Or maybe you want to do watercolor and work with some wet into wet using multiple colors or the same color. So whatever medium you want, you're going to go ahead and have fun with it. But don't be afraid to use multiple mediums together. I did that in my sample here. I used color pencil for the smaller areas because color pencil should be used for small areas. And then I used watercolors for my larger areas. If I were to use color pencil in my large area, that would take me a very long time, and that may also start to hurt my hand a little bit because it's such a big area. So think about what mediums would be best for those smaller areas. That would be color pencil, oil pastel, or markers. And then what mediums would be best for the larger areas? That would be watercolor, chalk pastel, and those are really good for larger areas. So think about what might work best for you and your picture and how you want to use those color schemes and those mediums in those two images. So you want to try and change it up. In this side, I used pure watercolor, no color pencil at all. But this side, I used watercolor and color pencil. So you can decide. It doesn't have to be watercolor or color pencil. It can be oil pastel, it can be chalk pastel, it can be a little bit of oil pastel with watercolor, or maybe color pencil and chalk, or color pencil and watercolor, however you want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and get started on my pictures, and you should go ahead and get started as well. So I used watercolor and color pencil in my sample, but I think I'm going to change it up for today's project. I'm going to use some markers in my left side. I'm going to use a primary or triadic color scheme, red, yellow, and blue. So I'm going to show you how you can change up these colors, because obviously the sample that I have here is realistic. So I have a dog, which is a realistic animal. I have a background scene, which is realistic, but how do we use unrealistic colors for those realistic drawings? So I'm going to show you how you can do that. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to color in my dog. So I'm going to use some yellow. I'm going to use yellow for my lighter areas. What you do want to do actually before you start coloring, please take your Sharpie and outline all of those pencil lines. So if you're still drawing, finalize all of those drawing steps. Pause if you need the time. But once you are done, take your Sharpie and outline all of those drawing steps. Once you're done outlining, then you can start coloring. So pause if you need the time as you're outlining. But once you are done outlining, we're going to continue on our drawing, on our coloring. So I'm going to take my yellow and I'm going to color this middle area of my dog. I'm going to go ahead and color my ears. Now when you're using a limited color palette and you're sticking with only 3 or 4 colors, this goes for triadic color schemes, tetradic color schemes, and even a limited color palette. You want to try and work so that way those colors don't touch each other as best as you can do that. You want to try and alternate those colors far away from each other, the best that you can do. So it may take some time to do that. It may work best if you plan it out first, especially if you're using limited colors, only 3 to 4. You want to think about where those colors will be placed, how you're going to arrange it, and make sure that you plan it out so that way you can do your best to not have them touch. Okay. I'm going to do yellow for the feet as well. Okay, now I'm going to choose my darker color. You also, when you have a limited color palette, 3 to 4 colors, you also want to think about what is your darkest color, what's your medium color, and what's your lightest color. Because you also want to think of shading. What color is going to be used as the shadow areas or those darker areas? What color is going to be used as maybe an accent color or a color that is used very rarely? And what color is going to be maybe the main color? Okay? So I think my yellow is going to be more of an accent color. My red is going to be more of the main color. And then my blue is going to act as my dark color. So I'm going to use my blue for my nose here, for my eyes. And then I think I'm going to use it for my front legs. Now remember, when we use our markers, we want to outline first, and then depending on how big the area is, you're going to use the side to fill in those large areas, one line at a time in one direction. But if it's a smaller area, you can use the tip of your marker, but still go in one direction and with one line at a time. Then at the end, if you have any white spots left, you can take the tip and go back in to fill in those white spots. So now that I've filled in my darker areas of my dog, I'm going to take my red and fill in the rest of those areas. Now, if you've never dealt with different color schemes before, or different mediums, it's very important that you think or try and find examples on your own of where these different color schemes or mediums appear. Of course, they're not going to appear everywhere, but the most important thing to look at for drawings and illustrations are children's books. So if you have a bookcase of your favorite books, you would want to take a look at them, see if you can recognize the medium that they're using and any color schemes that they may be using as well. Alright, so I colored in my dog, and now I'm going to color in the rest of my objects. So I'm going to start with my front object here. I'm going to make my bowl my main color, my red here. I'm outlining first. And I'm going to fill in using the side and one line at a time, one direction. If you'd like, maybe you can think about where your light source is, and maybe you want to leave a little highlight where you want the light source to be. I'm going to make the inside of my bowl darker because that's usually how opened objects look. If they have an opening, those openings, the inside of that object is usually much darker. Now I'm going to make the food yellow because I used all my colors already. Now remember, these primary colors were mainly used by pop artists. Okay, so as you're coloring, if you're using red, blue, and yellow, triadic colors like me, as you're coloring it, you may start to see the similarities between pop art and your art. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of blue to kind of make some curved lines in the food, make it look, add some texture, make it look a little bit fuller. And maybe I'll add a line on the left side of the bowl to make it look a little darker. Okay, so now that I have my bowl and my dog, next what I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out if I want my background to be in marker as well or if I'm going to change up the materials. I think I'm going to go ahead and change the materials. I do have some smaller objects in the background, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up with coloring that in. I'm going to color them in with yellow. Those are smaller. So since yellow is my accent color, I'm choosing small areas that can be filled in with that. Accent colors are meant for smaller areas, rarely used because they're so small and you barely have, you usually only have very few small areas. Okay, now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make my shadow underneath my dog. Now my darker sides are on the left, so I'm going to make my shadow on the left side. I'm going to color that in. Now again, my blue is acting as my darker color, so I'm going to use my blue for my shadow. Even if my ground is not going to be a lighter shade of blue, because we're not thinking about shades for this project. We're thinking about values, light, medium, and dark, using just that limited color. Kind of looks like a superhero doggy. All right, so now that I have that, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some chalk pastels to color in the rest of my background. Now chalk and marker go really well together because if I were to use watercolors for my larger areas, that water may bleed into my marker and it may make my marker bleed and run outside of the areas that I colored in with marker. I want to keep that pretty controlled, so I'm going to be using some chalk pastel. Now I'm going to think about how I want to create my picture. Okay, do I want my sky to be blue, my mountains red, and then maybe my ground yellow? That could work. Or do I want my ground red, maybe my mountains blue, and my sky yellow? But I have yellow for my trees, so if I put yellow in the sky, then that's not really going to work. So I think I'm going to go with my first choice. Blue for the sky, red for the mountains, and then yellow for the ground. Now I know we have red on the outside of the dog's head, and then we also have yellow on the dog's feet here. But for the most part, that is going to be the best option where the red is not touching anything else other than the top of the head. So think about how you're going to do that. Think about those different ways. If you want to just continue with marker, if you did something similar to me and you want to just continue the whole rest of your picture with marker, you can. Especially if you're using triadic colors, you may not get the same type of colors when you change to different mediums. So if that's not going to work, then you do want to make sure that you try to stick to the same medium. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start. So I'm going to take blue for my sky. I'm going to leave my clouds white. Now, colors like white and black or gray are neutral colors. So if they end up needing to be used in your pictures, that's okay because they don't necessarily stick to any color scheme. There are neutral color schemes, which is where you use only black or only gray or only white, but it's not necessarily a color scheme that we're thinking about here. So I'm using my fingers to blend in. Once I'm done, I'm going to tap off my paper so all that dust can go away. Now that I'm done with my sky, I'm going to get my mountains next. I'm going to take my red. Outline around the top of the hills and around my dog so that I can try to not get any color in my dog. I'm using that edge here since that was a small area. And then on this side, I'm going to use the side, fill in the rest of the areas. Remember, you want to press lightly, and you want to just get a little bit of color on there. You don't want to go back and forth and fill everything in. And then once you are done, you're going to get your finger, go right along the outline so that way that can eliminate the dust and not fly into your marker or your dog or your subject, whatever subject you drew. I'm going to tap that off. Now remember, anytime you're using chalk pastels, you do want to do your best to clean off your hands. That way you keep your picture as clean as possible. Alright, so for our yellow next on the ground, I'm going to go ahead and take my yellow. I'm going to try my best not to get near the red that I used in the hill because we know red and yellow make orange, and I don't want my ground to turn orange because that's not going to follow my color scheme. So I'm just going around my objects here. Alright, and now that I have that, I'm going to take my fingers and very carefully blend that in. Then I'm going to dump out my dust. And now I have my background, my foreground, and all of those other objects colored in with my primary color scheme. Next, what I'm going to do is color in the right side. Now I can use any color scheme and any medium. So I'm going to change up my mediums and then go back to watercolors just like I did for my original sample. And I think I'm going to go with a complementary color scheme, again just like I did for my original sample. So I'm going to show you how you can use those unrealistic colors and also how you can use realistic colors for your pictures. Okay? Now I hope you guys are having fun using all of those different mediums and color schemes. I can't wait to see what these look like in the end result. But once you're done with that first drawing and coloring area, make sure that your desk and hands are completely clean before you start that next section. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my watercolors down here. Now, when you're using watercolors, there is a fun way to manage the water and amount of water that you're using to go from light to a dark color. Okay, so I'm going to help you guys do that as well so you can see just how it works. So I'm going to bring my palette here over to the side, and I'm going to scoot this over so you can see more of it. Okay, and I'll show you how you can go from light to dark using one color. So first I'm going to take my small brush and I'm going to fill in my dog and my smaller objects. Okay, so I'm going to take my water and I want to make my dog and small objects a nice dark good color. So I'm going to just take a little bit of water, brush it off. I have my paper towel here. So make sure you have a paper towel with you so that way you can wipe off the extra water. And I'm going to be using an orange for my dog. Now I want to still have light, dark, and medium colors to show a different range of orange on my dog so that way it's not all just one color. So I'm going to do that by mixing some water into a palette, taking my color, which I'm going to take some yellow orange, I'm going to mix that into my water. The more water I have, the lighter your color is going to look. The less water you have, the darker your color is going to look. So if you're not too sure whether your color is going to look light or dark, you're going to take a scrap piece of paper and test it out. They're called swatches. You swatch your color to figure out what that color looks like. So I'm going to start with my light orange, take some water, and I'm going to fill in the lighter areas, which is going to be the middle of the body. Now again, you guys have different subjects, and so you're going to figure out where those colors are going to be, where your light color is, where your dark color is. I'm going to fill in the middle of the face. Now, if you don't like coloring in with paint in small areas, then you can use a different medium to fill in these smaller areas. Mediums that work really well with watercolor are oil pastel or colored pencil. You can add multiple layers to help you get a little bit darker. But I like those two light colors. I'm going to also make my tail a little bit light as well. Try your best to stay inside the area. If you accidentally color outside, watercolors are nice because if you start out very lightly and then work your layers up to make it darker, the lighter you start off with, if you get a little bit outside, it's going to be so light that when you make your next color and color that area in, you should not be able to see it once you color it in. Okay, so now that I have all my light areas, I'm going to take a little bit more yellow-orange. I'm going to make my yellow-orange just a little bit darker. So I'm going to test that out again. I have my light orange, and now I have my darker orange. Okay, so I'm going to color that in around the rest of the head and the front legs. So you want to use the tip, even if you're using a smaller brush, always use the tip when you have a really small area that you need to get around. Alright, so I just finished up my darker orange area for the head. Now I'm going to get the front legs. I'm going to make these feet the same color. So as you can see, I'm changing up the way that I use my dark and medium colors and lighter colors than I did on the dog over here, and that's fine. If you want to change it up, you may. Whatever works for you. Okay. Now I have that area colored in. I am now going to make my orange much darker. And since I'm just working with different shades of orange here, I'm going to make a darker orange by mixing in some red. So I'm going to make more of a red orange. So that's a lot of red. I'm going to take some more yellow orange and mix that back in. So now I'm going to get some water, make it just a little bit lighter, and I have a red orange. And again, you kind of want to test it, make sure it's not too close to the same color. My color was a little too light. It had a little bit too much water in it, so I'm just making it a little bit more darker. Let's see, I want it a little bit darker, so I'm going to get a little bit more red. Oh, there we go. So now I have my red orange. Okay, so now I'm going to color in the rest of my dog. Hopefully you can see the difference. It might be a little hard because this red orange is a little light. If I keep going back in with layers, it will get it a little bit darker. Maybe I'll add just a little bit more red. There we go. So we have more of a red orange. That's much easier to see on the screen. Alright, so now I have my light orange, my dark orange, or my medium orange, and my red orange. Okay, so those are all shades of orange. Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and paint in my smaller areas. So I still have my orange here, and I'm going to focus on my orange areas in those other small objects. So I'm going to come back in with some yellow orange, get it a nice dark color. I'm going to fill in the tree trunk here because I don't want to use brown since that is not part of my color scheme. I'm using complementary color scheme, so I'm going to use blue, orange, red, and green. Color in a little bit of this tree trunk here, a little bit darker. So as you can see, depending on the amount of water and the amount of paint you have, those colors are going to get darker or lighter. I'm going to get a little bit more of my yellow orange and paint in the center of my flower here. Keep that nice and light. All right. So just by adding water, I made this dark orange get just a little bit lighter. Alrighty. So now that I have that, next I'm going to be using some red to fill in the flower petals. I get some more red here. Now I want my flower petals to be nice and dark. Since they're super close up, whenever you have objects that are close up, that means that the object and details are going to be crisp, clear, and bold. So I'm going to get this red to be nice and dark. Again, just add those layers to get a nice good coat on there, similar to the rest of the colors around that object. Okay, I need some more red, some more water. Now with watercolors and all that water that you need to manage, you really want to take your time. Alright, so now I have a nice red coat on my flower. Now if you want a different shade of red, you're just going to maybe you want to get a red violet, but we're going to try to stick to as pure red as possible because red and green are the complementary colors. You can also work on shading and kind of blend it to where one side is darker than the other. So if I wanted to, I can get a little bit more red and make maybe my right side a little bit darker. Okay, so now that I have my red flowers, next I'm going to work on the smaller areas for the green parts. Now I'm going to use dark green actually. Place that into my palette. Try to get it as dark as I can. And now I'm going to color in my leaves and my stem. And again, this area is closer up to you, so you want to try and get these as dark as you can. I'm going to go back into my pure green. There we go. And since we have some leaves overlapping, you can work on making some of those a little bit darker than the others. Maybe your stems are a little bit darker than your leaves. If you have these same subjects, of course. Now, as you start placing one complementary color next to the other, you really want to be careful that they don't mix, because complementary colors mixed together create a very muddy brown color, and that's what we don't want for your beautiful artwork here. But by going very closely next to it, very carefully, you will start to see what complementary colors next to each other can do for your artwork. It's making your, if you're doing green leaves and red flowers, those flowers start to really stand out. You can also add a little bit of shading into your leaves as well. Just make sure that you follow along with what other shading you did. If you have one side darker on the right, then you want all of the right sides to be darker. If you have it darker on the left, then all of the sides should be darker on the left. So I did my darker side on the right of my flowers, so I'm going to make the right side of my leaves and stems just a little bit darker. Alright, so now I have my leaves and flowers filled in. Now I'm going to do the leaves in the tree in the background. Now I'm going to add some more water to my green here, because since it's in the background, we don't want it to be as dark as the green in the foreground, because what we see in the foreground is going to be always darker than what we see in the background. So my tree leaves are going to be much lighter because they're further away. They're not as bright. But if you'd like, you can add a little bit of shading. However, again, they're far away, so we usually don't see as much detail. So you may not be able to see the detail in your trees, but if you would like to, maybe they're a little bit closer up, you can definitely add that. So I'm just going around adding some texture toward the bottom near the trunks. Now if your tree gets a little bit too dark at the top, take a paper towel and kind of lighten it up. Alrighty. Now I'm going to take some more of my green and fill in the tree over here. Maybe add just a little bit of a darker shade on the right. Again, very little detail because it's further away. Alrighty. So now that I have that, I'm going to finish up the background. So I'm going to start with the sky. I'm going to take a bigger brush, medium brush here, and I'm going to go with a blue for the sky. I'm going to start with a nice dark color toward the bottom of the sky. I don't see much at the bottom. I'm going to go about a quarter of the way up, that darker blue. Then I'm going to, instead of grabbing more paint, I'm just going to start brushing it up until I run out of paint. So I can get lighter and lighter. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter at the top. So lighter and lighter. Now instead of just doing a plain sky background, if you wanted to do maybe wet into wet like we learned in our color wheel, you can. But I'm doing like a gradient from light to dark for my sky. Not only is that going to make it look realistic with atmospheric perspective, because as the sky gets further away from us or higher, further away from us, it's going to get lighter. But it also shows us how we can manage our water and get from dark to light. So I'm just continuing up with my brush strokes, not getting any more paint or water, and it's automatically going to get lighter. And that helps with your value scale. Okay, so we go from dark to light. Now this blue next to this orange is what's going to help make that blue stand out and those orange stand out because blue and orange are complementary colors. Now we're going to do our green for our grass. So for the grass, I'm going to continue with my medium brush. I'm going to take my green. I'm going to continue using my darker green. And I'm going to go toward the bottom, make it a little bit lighter than my leaves and stems here so that they can stay standing out. Try to go around all of those objects the best that I can. But I'm going to pretty much do the same thing that I did for the sky. I'm going to get it darker at the bottom and then lighten it up at the top. Now you can keep it light just by the pure water and how it automatically gets lighter, or you can lighten it up with a lighter green. That's up to you. I'm just trying to get around my flowers right now. So I can just start with my gradient. Get some more water here. And start to come up. And get that lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. Now if you run out of water toward the top, that's okay. I'll show you what we can do to still make it look lighter, but not pure white. Alright, so to still make it look lighter, but not white, I'm going to take some yellow green here, make it nice and light, and I'm going to kind of blend it into my medium green area, and then lighten that up at the top. So now it's lighter green, but it's still painted in. Blend that in. Alright, so now you have your dark to your light. Now, if you don't want to just leave it plain, what you can also do is go in and add some texture by taking some dark green and going in vertical strokes with a smaller brush to add some grass. Now, the closer you are to the bottom, you want these strokes to look a lot longer because they're closer to you, but then the higher you get, those strokes are going to get much shorter and lighter. So I'm going to start going shorter and shorter, and then lighter and lighter. So that's what you can do as well, just to add a little bit of texture. But that is going to be the end of our picture today. So you can go ahead and finish up your picture and composition and subject the way that you would like to, whatever you think it needs next. And again, when you are finished with your final image, please share that with us on our Facebook page. We would love to see what you came up with and how you changed up your composition, what color scheme you chose, what mediums you chose, and I want you to think about using those different color schemes and compositions. How does that change up the image? They're the same subjects, but what changes about them? Is it a drastic change? Is it a subtle change? What did you do for your composition? So as you share your artwork on our Facebook page, please share that with me as well. What did you notice? What was the change that you noticed? With your color schemes, maybe one side looks a little bit more calm than the other. One side looks more unrealistic or pop art than the other. One side looks more abstract and one side looks more realistic. You know, think about what those different compositions and color schemes did to your picture and share that with me if you noticed it. Okay, so I'm just finishing up my texture here. All right, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and all right, guys, so we just finished up our composition week 3 of our project in our creativity and contest class. And so I hope you guys learned a lot from this lesson, from this project. We tied in everything that we've done so far, our mediums, our colors, and now composition. So I hope you guys have learned a lot because next week we are going to be tying everything that we've learned to create a full and final project all on our own in order to make a submission or an entry for the PTA Reflections contest this year. Okay, I'll tell you the theme and I'll help you out with as much creativity and possibilities as I can. But this is all about you. How are you going to get creative? How are you going to use everything that we learned to create your very own picture? Okay, so that's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm so excited to go over that with you guys next week. So keep working on this project, complete it, share it with us, and get ready for next week. Thank you guys all so much for joining, and I hope you enjoyed this class. We'll see you next time.